Hello everyone, how are you doing? Hope you're keeping well. Guess what? It's November already. Crikey, how did that happen? So, it's time that we looked at two more White Dwarfs, 10 years apart. This is a good one. Look what's on the cover. You know what's in this one. You know what's in this one. You know what was in this one. We haven't got it in this one, but maybe I'll see if I can find that. It's got to be on YouTube. I'll link it. And this one, which I missed out on in my childhood, so we're going to have a look at that one. Let's get on with it. Okay, here we go. Issue 95, November 1987, and the release of Warhammer 3rd edition. The big orange book edition, the edition that we all know and love in the old Hammer community, the ultimate edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle with this iconic John Sibbick cover there of the clash with Harry the Hammer, and some notable figures from the miniatures range at the time, and the now infamous Flexi disc by Sabbat. So let us see what else is in store in this issue. This is a Sean Masterson editorial. Science fiction and fantasy authors have provided rock musicians with inspiration for almost as long as Fender have been making Stratocasters. Hawkwind made the crossover more successfully than most, not only writing songs inspired by Michael Moorcock's work, but actually recording and performing with him as well. But the flexi-disc bound in this issue must be the first case of rock music inspired by a mythos developed entirely for an RPG, so we thought you ought to hear it. Well, yes, okay. Let's not hear it because it's not included in this issue. But you can go and check it out yourselves, and maybe I'll do my own version of it a bit later on. In the sphere of now referring only to Games Workshop products within the magazine, we have Stephen Hand looking at his recent publication, Fury of Dracula, a board game based entirely on Bram Stoker's novel, with no nods to any films or other kind of popular culture that might have celebrated Dracula, and actually one of the better games, I think. It's a kind of blind, all players versus one player romp around Europe trying to track down where Dracula is. Dracula charts his movements secretly, and then but sees where the other players are and tries to avoid them, and you can kind of trap him and pinpoint where he is. And yes, it was one of the more enjoyable Stephen Hand games. I don't know if, like Chaos Marauders and other games, it was a kind of reprint or a knockoff of one that already existed with a new skin on it. I get the impression from this article that it isn't, that it's an entirely new creation of his, because he talks in detail about how he was inspired to make it work. But he is also talking about his own piece, so would he admit if it was actually a reskin of another existing game? Don't know. And we're also looking at Warhammer City, the Guide to Middenheim, which was going to be part of the Power Behind the Throne series, and then got split out into its own book as a kind of source book for that series, and the Judge Dredd floor plans. We have some interesting news here in the Thrud World Tour. Here's a bit of a snip of Carl Critchlow painting or drawing somebody's head. I'm not quite sure who this one is. Maybe this is Kurgan Armadillo Bradley himself on the head of a Thrud body, which sadly we can't see. But there you go. Carl Critchlow touring the land, putting fans' heads on scanned prints of Thrud. And then big queues outside of the Derby shop. We have got some of the original Dogs of War here. Again, there'll be some familiar figures here. Some of these guys were in production for a nice long time. Some of them now sold by Foundry. got some lovely characterful figures there. What have we got on here? Look, there is a rescheduling Chainsaw Warrior, or as it's called, Chainsaw Warrior 2, or as it's called in the trade, Death's Head. Well, this game sees our hero teamed up with a group of associates raiding a keep in the Transylvanian Alps in a bid to steal the Spear of Longinus from a band of 21st century Nazis. Well, that didn't manifest, did it? I wonder how far that actually got. There's also been some delays and changes to Dungeon Quest again. Here's Jervis and Dave Andrews playing Drakborgen, the original Swedish version of what became Dungeon Quest. It's been through about 4 different names at this point, and honestly, it is coming. Honestly, we are going to release it at some point. They're clearly still trying to struggle with either the production of it or the translation from the Swedish. Here is Thrud. To be more specific, Thrud and the alien mutant radioactive zombie killer beasties. Sput, crunch, mash, scrung. Well, the violence seems to be going quite well. I think we could do with a plot. There you go. I wonder how long it took to write that script. And some lovely Chaos Beastmen back in the days before Beastmen were all just goat-headed people. There's some nice bulldog men in here, and a rhino man, and some lizardy men, and the monkey-like guy, along with the classic goatee guys who I feel like stayed in the range for quite a while. And these weird kind of pointy-headed, almost a little bit familiar-looking, these guys. Yeah, not sure what they were supposed to be, but they're weird-looking, and that's suitable for Chaos Beastmen, right? Here's part 2 of To Live and Die in Mega City 1. You may remember that last month we left our intrepid judges watching an H-Wagon crash and burn into a chemical factory. They are now called before the sector house to explain just how that came to be. And as a result of which are sent off on what is a lot more linear this time. So To Live and Die in Mega City 1 Part 1 was a bit more wander around the city, normal day in Mega City 1, trying to find out what's going down and pick out the pertinent parts of the plot. This one is a lot more focused. They're being sent out in a kind of Cursed Earth adventure with a land cruiser and some quasar bikes across the Cursed Earth, trying to find... am I going to tell you what they're trying to find? Maybe not. Anyway, they come across this ruined outpost. It's a part of the city that was destroyed in the Apocalypse War, and they have to bring something back from the outpost here. So there's a lot of exploration, a lot of trying to work out what was going on there before it was bombed to extinction, and anything that might have been going on there since. And as you can tell, there are some people in cryogenic sleep that must be woken up, but all is not well here, because there is life of a kind in amongst the fallout, and it's not friendly to the judges, and it has the potential to take over the killdozers and the land cruisers, which is not a great thing to happen to the players, it's got to be said. Here's an advert for those wonderful plastic slaughter bases, the very practical, functional regiment bases, which I love. The 40mm square bases that seem to be impossible to get anywhere now, and these display bases that I've only seen a couple of in the wild, and would dearly love to get my hands on some of those. They're very, very pretty, but obviously not very practical for wargaming, so there weren't that many of them around. Here are some elven personalities, which I would beg you to take note of for when we look at our White Dwarf in 5 years' time next month. Some of these may be familiar to you in the photographs 5 years on from this point, but yes, some lovely elf sculpts here. This guy, one of my all-time favourites. I think, wasn't he the general that Mike McVeigh used in his Wood Elf army? So obviously very easy to recognise, very, very noticeable, very prominent in the pages. I think I had this guy as a kid, and he looks very familiar to me, but I think he was missing a right hand. He might have been a jumble sale purchase, missing a right hand. And I kind of remember that he had a bit of a kind of, you know, Devil Horns rock thing going on. So maybe somebody else had sculpted that on or found a replacement hand for him or something. I don't know. I cannot quite remember. Was there a different wizard that had Devil Horns? I can't remember. Anyway, maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. Let us have a look at the 3rd edition, the Ultimate Edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. This is quite a nice introduction article because it has got this kind of storyline of a kind of goblin assault that's going on here. And it tells you a little bit of the story and then explains how that would translate into a Warhammer Fantasy Battle. It talks about mass troops and maneuvers and the things that have changed. So the loss of the no, sorry, that's the next one. Not the loss of anything. The way that the psychology rules work, and the addition of regiment maneuvers and things. And it talks interestingly about characters. Where is it here? Larger than life and very powerful individuals are part of what sets fantasy tabletop gaming apart. Mighty thewed warriors who can stand off a whole regiment with his trusty broadsword as part of every fantasy battle. Of course, that's more relevant to what we know now as Hero Hammer, the 4th and 5th edition, but here it talks about how characters are designated levels and used throughout the game, and which of course was a more organised step from the 2nd edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And if you're interested in the differences, looking at 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th edition, you can check out my Encyclopedia Warhammica posts. I believe I got up to the differences in 4th edition, discussing how the game's mechanics were changing in that system. And we talk about wizards here and there. Again, very different to the 2nd edition, the way that they can pick up and learn a wider range of spells, and the bigger creatures that are included in the bestiary. So a pretty nice, along with these lovely scenes and tableaus here, taking up most of the pages. A nice overview of the current edition, even if this is not the finished cover. If you look closely, you'll be able to see the surround of the hammer here is a flat red colour. There's none of the detailing on around the hammer that was actually in the final version. So whether they've scanned an early version of the artwork and mocked this up with that, I don't know. But this is not quite the finished version, which is one of those examples of a prototype being visible in the pages of White Dwarf before the actual thing was released. With heavy metal, we have another classic, Rick Priestley discussing the iconic, also iconic, deodorant grav tank here, with his little step-by-step of how he made it. And in an odd twist, was it earlier this year or the year before, somebody released a resin kit for making this. So if you can no longer find a deodorant stick, maybe it's not of the right sort, you can buy a resin kit for making this tank, the whole point of which was that it was made from bits and pieces that you might have had lying around. So yeah, things have come full circle. But here is a step-by-step account of how to make this wondrous piece of Warhammer 40,000 history. And then here are some more kit-bashed vehicles from sort of action figure toys and Zoids. Of course, lots of bits from Zoids in all of these models, along with some examples of how to, or some instructions for how to go about making these particular ones. We've got the release of the Dwarf Flame Cannon here, with the wonderfully apt crew that are covering their ears and their face just in case it blows up. the limited edition Snotling Sawmaster with the dwarf with inferiority complex, and this iconic, should I say it again? Iconic Orc command group that appeared alongside the Plastic Regiment's painting guide in the Warhammer 3rd edition rulebook. Here is a opportunity to win yourself a copy of the Warhammer 3rd edition rulebook. Don't write in, we won't give you a copy, they won't give you a copy anymore. But you can tell us what's the weapon skill of an orc. Is Sven Hasselfriesian an elf, a dwarf, or a slan? And what's the maximum range of a normal bow in Warhammer Fantasy Battle? If you know the answers, are they the same in 2nd and 3rd edition? Probably. You could have written in and got one, but obviously you can't now. And here is another sneak preview from the 3rd edition rulebook. This is looking at giants, one of the most flavoursome bits of the book, discussing the various attack forms of the giants, and of course they're falling over with this handy fallen giant template, which I don't feel like it got much bigger. Maybe it got bigger in 6th edition, but there were a number of different versions of this, and of course this itself is a lot smaller than the Citadel giant and then the Marauder giant that came out to accompany it. But vertical exaggeration, right? Because you're looking at the table from above. We've also got a couple of new NPCs for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 2 teachers. One being this rather sneaky, grumpy academic with his one-eared dog, who is actually a fairly young charlatan in disguise, but he can accompany the party and show them some stuff. And the other being, oh, there you go, turned over 2 pages. The other being this rather portly elf. Not often that you see an overweight elf. Even less frequently do you see an overweight elf in a wizard costume teaching astronomy to player characters. But there you go. That's something that you could get in this version of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Here are the skeleton war machines from the Machineries of Destruction, another one of those amazing ranges, and the Skull Chucker, of course, the Screaming Skull Catapult that stayed in production for a really long time. Shame this didn't, but is a lovely, lovely chariot nevertheless. Here are some barbarians, some of which I painted up earlier this year. Recognise them from the Warriors combat cards, some of which are now available from Foundry, so that's cool. The Chaos Hounds, and part 1 of a Stormbringer adventure by Matt Williams, a fairly major Stormbringer adventure that's going to span the next few issues. So this is just a general overview before everything kicks off, and it's a adventure that features the Laughing God Bellow, who has really got it in for some people that he created, who then decided that they weren't going to worship him as a god. And so he got laughed out of the pantheon, and so now he's got some subtle revenge fitting to his rather warped sense of humour to inflict upon them. And into this mess, of course, the players are flung, as so often, into circumstances completely beyond their control. But it also features airships. They decided that the forces of law were having a bad lot compared to the forces of chaos, for whom it was easy to come up with creatures and things, and so airships are given as one of these fun technological contraptions that the forces of law can have. Although this looks like an Ian Miller illustration, but it's not. It's Tony Huff, our friend Tony Huff, who's doing the illustrations here. This looks like a very chaotic, lawful airship to me. This one looks a bit more law-like, but there you go. They are all lawful, apparently. And then we're going to take a look at Sabbat, signed to, of course, the Warhammer record label, when there was such a thing. And they have provided this flexi disc that is no longer in the middle of this version of White Dwarf anyway, but it is fairly entertaining. They have provided us with copies of the music here. What's the connection between Sabbath and White Dwarf? Well, call them sharp-eyed. The Games Workshop staff who've been dragging themselves along to Games Day and various dragon meets for the last few years finally caught on there were a lot of gamers turning up wearing the same t-shirts. They found out that Saxon wasn't the name of a role-playing supplement for RuneQuest, and that Def Leppard weren't in the monster manual. Ha 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 ha. And Sabbat, being players of Games Workshop products, they had met and they were at school in Nottingham, so they were around the studio and met up with the guys there, and so they were taken on. Ha ha. John Blanche was responsible for talent scouting these guys. He heard them on the Friday Rock Show, and actually met them at a Slayer gig, and he suggested that they come up with an album for Games Workshop. However, they had an impending recording session with a German company called Noise, and so they had not very much time to write and record this, as anyone who has listened to this album, or not this album, this track, this song, will know the lyrics are as so great. Yes, once the mighty cities now crumbled and turned to sand, here dwelt the old Slan, the master's infinite wisdom, a god-given right to these genetic scientists forming new life. Yet these powerful beings could never have known the seeds of destruction were already sown. See how the void gates that held back the chaos foe shudder and shatter, an entropy overload spewing forth creatures, obscene machinations, malicious entities warping creation, then shrouded in darkness they silently wait, counting the days till the blood god wakes. And then there's the infamous chorus, blood for the blood god. To be fair, there is one line in here that's actually quite good. I like, from their holes and caverns creep 10 million orc and goblin feet with hungry hearts and sharpened knives. They come to take your worthless lives. But for the most part, it's pretty cheesy teenage songwriting lyrics, and that's not entirely unsurprising, given that they had to wait for their recording session because, where is it? Where does it say here? Oh, I've lost my place. Oh yes, here we go. The band sent a copy of the session to Noise, who were impressed enough to ring up and offer them an immediate contract in March 87. This was signed in August this year, as they had to wait until Andy reached the age of 18. So yes, they are barely into legal adulthood, and they are writing what you might expect for people of that age. Now, I have to say, the later, and I'm not talking loads later, like 5 years down the line, Sabbath albums, I'm quite a fan of. I do quite enjoy a bit of Sabbath, but this early effort, maybe they were just finding their feet. It's pretty cheesy, it's pretty terrible, but give it a listen. It's entertaining, if nothing else. We've got some Alchemy adverts. We're taking a look at some of John Blanche's illustrations here. A preview sketch for the Warhammer cover there, along with some of his most renowned paintings that of course ended up in the 3rd edition rulebook because they were looking for as much art as they possibly could find. Death Zone, the Blood Bowl supplement, and then we are at the end, and we will roll on 10 years to a very different looking, very, very different looking White Dwarf. So stick with me and we will roll on. Now, as I say, this is after I had stopped collecting White Dwarf for reasons I mentioned in previous videos, but this is the start of a very particular era of White Dwarf, so I'm excited to experience this for kind of the first time, because this is where we get Paul Sawyer. Wah, fat bloke, taking the helm. The late lamented Paul Sawyer passed away early this year, very sadly. I count myself fortunate enough to have some of his figures in my collection. which takes on slightly more significance now. But I know that for most people, or not most people, let's say for some people, this is the golden age of White Dwarf, with Paul Sawyer at the helm, steering things. That kind of slightly chaotic, rudderless steering that was going on in the previous 2 issues has resolved itself into a more structured and focused magazine. And I think it's no coincidence that the reins are being handed over here by Robin Jews, because Robin, as we saw in last month's mid-90s issue, and as we will see in next week's issue, was very much the steering force of keeping White Dwarf a very focused hobby magazine and stopping it from sprawling into something crazy and chaotic, which it clearly did in the last two issues. We've got the solution here. So I had some viewers contact me to tell me exactly where the lictor was in the cactus picture that I had not been able to find for the last 20 years. And they said to do exactly what, if I had collected for 2 more months, I'd have found out how to do here. Hold the page up to a window, and you'll see the lictor through it. Now, this is a bit of a cop-out. I wasn't that impressed because, to be fair, they haven't even posed the lictors on the opposite side of the page so that they make a nice scene or they pop up in a particular place. It's literally just that you can see a photo of the lictor through the page, which is a bit rubbish, a bit naff. If you're going to go to that effort of making a competition, at least make it so that the lictor pops up in a clearing behind the scouts or something. But there you go. And a bunch of the Bretonnian questing knights coming out at this point. This is a Knight of the Realm, not a questing knight, but I missed all of that lot as well the first time round. Oh well. We've got a bit of a strange transition look here going on with the Gorka Morka orcs. So we've got the Brian Nelson Mega Toothy orcs here, who were just coming in Warhammer Fantasy Battle and making their way into the 40k universe. And then we've got these sculpts, some of which are I think they're Perry sculpts, which seem to be kind of harking back a little bit to a much earlier version of the orc face. So it could just be that these are youths, but these boys have also got slightly more of the old square-jawed, toothy look and less of the kind of gorilla orc Brian Nelson style. So it's a bit confused, it's a bit mixed up. These orc boys, the plastic orc boys, or maybe these are these metal orc boys? These are metal boys, right? I can't remember if these are the plastic ones from the kit or not. But anyway, the heads, they're pretty small, aren't they? Look, compared to the Nelson orcs. So just a very weird mix-up of styles there. But it resolved in the end. It resolved to everything looking like Brian Nelson orcs. Here's a look at some games played by the Andy Kettlewell's mob that he did the How I Put This Together article last month. Here's how they fared in a few games, and what's quite nice is that it gives you the between game breakdown as well. These are actually some vehicles made by other people, so we will come back to that. But yeah, it talks about a couple of fights and then the kind of campaign bit in between, which is nice given that Gorka Morka and Necromunda and Mordheim and all that, all those kinds of games have very much this kind of campaign element built into them, and you don't get that very often from a battle report. So quite nice to have this quick summary of how a game went, along with some nice photos, and then an analysis of why decisions were made afterwards to develop the gang in a particular direction. Yeah, here are these crazy vehicles from Richard Potter, Adrian Wood, Luca Missel, Simon Smith, Gav Thorpe, and Andy Chambers, of course, in their own inimitable styles, showing just what you can do with those plastic kits. Here we've got Jervis talking about the 97 Grand Tournament and how that went. We had his article outlining the changes he was making to the rules earlier in the year, and so here's his analysis of how it went. all swimmingly, of course. Here are some important questions that people have been asking about Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and the team's official answers to those. A scenario from Nigel Stillman, of course. It's a Bretonnian and Wood Elf scenario. A Bretonnian party trying to reclaim something from the midst of the Forest of Lurin and being set upon by a Wood Elf ambush. And how it goes down as part of the prelude to Perilous Quest. This is one of the Duke's coats of arms that is found or spotted in Perilous Quest was the inspiration for this prelude to it, to explain what happened to that Duke, which meant that his arms then ended up in the middle of the Forest of Lurin. Here's a look at Games Day Golden Demon USA 97 with giant catapult templates and a kind of Formula One racetrack and this crazy forest river board, and some of the Golden Demon entries, some really nice entries, glorious multicoloured harlequins and forest dragon and snowy Kislevites and kinds of really nice entries. A nice mix up between the kind of bright colour schemes that were around at this time, and also a bit of creativity, a bit of conversion, a bit of scratch building. So it hasn't all gone to just sculpting factory miniatures. In this instance, there's lots of modelling work that's gone into it, which is nice to see. Hot on the heels of the Viper jet bike, here's a look at another plastic Eldar kit that must have been being developed simultaneously with it, I would have thought, although we're seeing the releases staggered. It would seem to me, they say this has been going on for about 18 months, they're making this kit, so it would seem to me that it must have been worked on at the same time as the Viper jet bike. Back in the Viper jet bike article, it talked about how making the plastic canopies, the clear plastic canopies, was very expensive for the tooling, so they needed to make sure it was used a lot. So now we've got the Viper jet bike, and now we've got the Falcon grav tank as well that uses the same hoods. And what I really like about this article is that it shows you this image of a pantograph, and pantographs are a particular favourite thing of mine. They're the way that factories used to reduce the scale of something. So you'd make your pattern nice and big and then run this milling arm over the top of it, and it would mill it in steel at small scale. And you could also set them up to invert it, so you could mill your molds in inverse. Very, very clever piece of kit. It's one of my long-term goals to have a go at making one of these, but they are quite complicated. But the principle behind them is very simple. You've got this sliding arm here that you can adjust to set the scale of reduction, and then you just run this side over the surface, and this mill on the other side mills it out of a block of steel or aluminium. Very, very clever piece of kit. Full Tilt, the free jousting game that I know lots of people exceptionally excited by this, and it's very cool. It's a lot of fun. Some people were playing it at Bring Out Your Lead a couple of years ago. It's always a nice spectacle. It's a nice quick game to play, and it makes for quite a fun participation game. And it also means that we get to see, ta-da, Dave Andrews' amazing Bretonnian joust diorama again. What a wonderful thing of beauty this is, and this was at Warhammer World the last time I was up there, so it was really nice to see. I love all the script in the background, and the tent's really nice, and the board is really nice, and the painting's really nice. He was a clever man, Dave. Oh, still is a clever man, isn't he, Dave Andrews? And then there were some free Bretonnian jousting buildings and things in here that are no longer in here because people have made them. And then here's your opportunity to take your stuff to a Games Workshop store and compete in a nationwide jousting tournament. That's exciting, isn't it? The big display board for Games Day gets a look at here. It's a bit of a shame that there isn't a full-on picture of the whole thing put together, but maybe there will be in a future article looking at building as sections of it and including this massive, great Epic 40,000 Gargant here, which, as you can see, is quite big. I'm going to look at some Space Marine Scout scenarios, some of those quick one-page battle reports. A return to Thorskinson's Island, again, part 5 of 6, and this is the 5th and penultimate account of our summer Warhammer campaign, because apparently Rick Priestley hasn't noticed that November is not summer anymore. Hasn't been summer for a couple of months, Rick. But here's what was going on when it was summer in the studio. We catch up with Andy Chambers' narrative 40k campaign that he described a little while ago that ended up feeding into Storm of Vengeance and is now scaled up into 40k. And here are some ideas for different types of campaigns that you can run: map campaigns and tree campaigns and narrative campaigns, along with Andy's take on what does and doesn't work in each of those situations, and how he has worked it into this campaign that crosses over between 40k and Epic 40,000, along with a full experience system. There you go. There it is in all its glory. And then we get to the catalogue pages with those weird Gorkamorka orcs. Colin Dixon and Brian Nelson, sorry. Not Perry's. I thought the Perrys were in... Oh yes, so the plastic kits here are Colin Dixon, Alan and Michael Perry getting involved in the plastic kits. These plastic orcs. I was right, these are the plastic orcs by the Perrys, but it's Colin Dixon and Brian Nelson, which is odd because Brian Nelson does these kind of orcs, but maybe these grots, that's it. The grots here are Brian Nelson. These must be Colin Dixon orcs that are in the slightly older style. And the Britannian Knights. And the Falcon Grav tank with an interesting mist listing here, because it says that it contains 1 Viper canopy, when clearly we need 2 Viper canopies, right, for each of these spots. And instead of the nice battle scene on the back, we've got this kind of slightly mixed, here's what's going on in this issue. No idea if that became a regular feature or not. We shall find out in next month's edition. Hope you enjoyed that quick run through of 2 very different decades of White Dwarf history. Join me next week for the intervening issue. Take care. I'll see you again.